So, an age ago I was looking around faster than light travel in sci-fi based on what I saw in the Mass Effect series, and the choices to depict it in that setting, which also led me to looking into more of the warp effects of Star Trek, of course, and I remember coming across a video about the streaks we see at warp speed. Now, years later, I'm producing videos here on the topic of warp drive and looking at various aspects of it. I tried seeking out that original source, but to no avail, to the point where I'm not even sure it was a video anymore. So I thought I'd produce my own on the topic. It's a long shot, but if anyone does remember this one, let me know in the comments. Alright then. When a ship goes to warp, there have been numerous ways to display the effect depending on the stylistic choices of the show. In the original series, there was no discernible look to it aside from the occasional streaking of stars, but more common was the Enterprise careering past the camera with a whoosh to depict its speeds. When it came time for the motion picture, we got far more elaborate streaking effects with lots of sparkles and other effects. Then, with the next generation through to Enterprise, we had the more typical warp effect, that being that the ship noticeably distorts, then extends into the distance, a small starburst, and then it's gone. This is visible both inside and outside of the vessel, and was added to represent a sort of light equivalent of a sonic boom, a breaching of the light speed barrier. Basically, imagine light being caught up in the subspace warp field, then being carried with the vessel in its pocket of space-time, until the ship leaves the vicinity by achieving warp 1. All that light is then released in a burst, appearing as a white flash. Why does this not happen with every warp drive? Shush. While at warp, we see small specks of light drifting by at speed, which come to a stop or simply vanish as the ship decelerates. Transwarp effects are depicted with even more of these, often extending into a visual rainbow as they fly past. In the Kelvin Universe film series, we got to see an evolution of this style, with effects more similar to the slipstream drive or transwarp conduit look seen from TNG onwards. This was a warp corridor effect that was more reminiscent of Star Wars' hyperspace travel, except when viewed from the outside. You got this noticeable lensing effect around the vessel. Then in Discovery we got something similar, which has been maintained on ships with the exception of the return of the Galaxy class Enterprise D and in Star Trek Lower Decks. This got me thinking, are these purely stylistic, or do they appear actually different for various warp drives? Honestly, yes, they are stylistic choices, and it's purely there to show a ship in motion. Staring at a black void would be dull, I'll get back to that, but let's explain what we might be seeing anyway. There is no doubt that some of the more distant light sources we see are in fact stars. Even if travelling at faster than light, they should no longer be visible, but for certain we can see some of these return from an elongated state upon deceleration, but not all can, as they pass too close to the vessel. In simple, faster than light travel, you would theoretically see absolutely nothing behind you as light cannot catch up, but at near light speed, you would see everything behind redshifted, as light's wavelength reached you with far less frequencies. The opposite would be true looking ahead, where everything would be blue shifted, as it all approaches at high frequencies. Essentially a visual version of the Doppler effect which you experience when cars pass you. Higher pitches approaching, lower departing. This is why, in Mass Effect, you see the red and blue haze, representing the effect stylistically, and what prompted me to start looking into this all that time ago. So, the blue hue of the light tunnel seen in the latest Star Trek is an interpretation of that blue shifted light streaking past. We even see it in TNG from a ship's point of view as it reaches warp speeds and it hits that starburst effect. The only inconsistency is that it should be turning red or fading to nothing behind the vessel, or from the camera's point of view. The additional lensing effect applied in the Kelvin Universe films represents the warp bubble effect, which looks pretty cool, but in theory nothing inside the warp field would notice any space-time deformation. But we do see that deformation of space-time takes place. This is when you see a ship elongate in the instant before a warp jump, especially in the TNG era. The ship is not deforming, but from an outside perspective it looks like it is. An alternate explanation for both the blue streaks and the small white motes is that what we're seeing is energized particles of matter interacting with the deflector field. The main deflector array acts to project a path of force ahead of the vessel, shunting aside smaller debris and dust, so that the vessel does not collide with anything at FTL speeds. With the forces at play at such speeds, it's not unlikely that such small matter would be energized in some way and illuminate, much like a charged particle of matter hitting the Earth's magnetosphere and producing an aurora effect. This ties in very well, in fact, with the streaky and mercurial nature of the energy ribbons we see in later warp iterations, and the blue shift effect could explain the coloration instead of the greens, ambers, purples of our Earthbound aurora. Another theory I have seen circulating is that it is an effect added by the view screen simply to indicate movement to the crew, to aid our simple brains in understanding the current direction and movement of the ship. Not sure I buy that one, as there's plenty of examples of it occurring beyond a ship's hull, but if that is the case, then it's being maintained for the viewer's benefit too, and we're back at the real answer again. It's an effect to convey momentum. Now, one of the few holes in these theories is an episode of Voyager set in an expanse of nothingness called the Void. Even when at warp, there was nothing to see beyond the vessel, as no light nor sensor data had reached them thanks to a 250,000 light-year envelope of theta radiation. We see no streaks of any kind, no stars, no smaller particles. It could simply be that the light of these was being swallowed up too, or that the void lacked even space dust. Otherwise, it does not add up with what else we see. Additionally, they are referred to as stars at other times, but this could be colloquialisms of the time, just referring to them as streaking stars, as it's easier than calling them motes of energized particles interacting with the warp bubble. So, whether or not we take the TNG version or the later version, it is most likely that the smaller motes of light that fly past are in fact energized particles, and if you really want to incorporate differences in how it looks as canon differences, then you can blame it on differing deflector technologies, or warp field frequencies. Essentially, however, it is just varying methods of displaying the same thing. Now, I've got a soft spot for the TNG era warp effect, but I can't deny that the blue tunnel does look far more interesting to me and might even be slightly more accurate. What gets crazier is when they just start adding all sorts of other effects because it looks cool, which I loved Lower Decks parodying. Thanks for watching another Warp Theory video. I should probably put all of these into a full playlist at some point or something. Until the next one, I've been Rick, thanks again, and goodbye.